Be the change you wish to see in the world is a far-reaching brief. What to do to effect a positive change for our planet and its inhabitants, to be more generous with word, deed, time, money, more humble, more gentle, more forgiving, more outward-facing, more green. Truly, the list of desirable changes is endless. So tonight, I'm championing kindness and courage. Importantly, for me, they speak of hope. Great literature abounds with thoughts on both. Aristotle said you will never do anything in this world without courage. And I appreciate that courage takes many forms and can be evoked in many ways. Leonine, first they came kinds of courage might be called for to tackle injustice, and a different sort of courage altogether might be needed to face a challenge such as, speaking at a TEDx event. Thackeray believed we should never lose a chance of saying a kind word, and I don't imagine I'm the only person in this room tonight who was, as a youngster, encouraged to say hello to people we might pass in the street, believing that we could be the only person who would speak to them that day. Like courage, kindness takes many forms. I recently learned of the tradition of suspended coffee, believed to have originated in Naples. When customers buy a coffee, they also pay in advance for a cup to be given to somebody else, usually perhaps somebody who couldn't otherwise afford it. This idea has borne several initiatives like suspended food, toys, poetry, books, and theatre tickets. And so kindness abounds. It might also take considerable courage to indicate you're in need of that sort of support, making the authenticity of that gift even more important. Last month, I had the great opportunity to be involved in a marathon where kindness and courage triumphed at every turn. All humanity, and actually a minion and a rhino, were gathered in an urban park on a sunny Sunday, and whatever the motivation, from the achievement of a personal best to a bucket list success, the wholesomeness and the momentum of the event was palpable. Even the walk through the carless streets to the park was striking. Strangers on a mission, purposeful, determined, and united. Many runners were accompanied by loved ones, encouraging and joking, and several lone runners were witnessed getting into step with each other, sharing tales of their travel to the park, their training, the trivial and the important. It was a diverse and inclusive crowd. Indeed, it's hard to believe that as recently as the 1960s, women were not typically welcome participants in marathons. The story of the Fearless 261 Club began on the streets of Boston in 1967 when a young Catherine Switzer, whose bib number 261, she was unsuccessfully accosted by officials as they tried to remove her from the race. She became the first woman to officially complete the Boston Marathon, and what courage that must have taken. To represent yourself in life, let alone in a high-stakes race like that, is just extraordinary. And she knew that if she was to fail, she would set back the cause for women. It took enormous bravery. In the marathon that I went to, the kindness of the crowd and the volunteers was truly memorable. Right from the start of the race, where thousands of runners were poised, busy, kindly volunteers were gathering discarded jumpers that were going to be re-gifted to other people who could make really good use of them. A friend had told me to expect that many participants would have their names written on their T-shirts. I could not begin to imagine why that might be useful, having not enjoyed that luxury since my mum sewed my name into my clothes as a child, until the race started. Then, however, it all became clear as I witnessed the impact this had on the runners. As they surged through the city streets, the crowds gathered along the route would shout out individuals' names, encouraging, praising, willing the runners to do well. Even being told, "You've got this," by a small child atop an adult's shoulders looked unexpectedly beneficial. Along every step of the 26 miles, the crowd was lively and encouraging. Many people had gone to great lengths for no other reason than their goodness to make the event as successful as possible. Some families were gathered at the end of their drives, having little parties that were amusing and motivating. The Queen enjoying a pavement-side cake was too lifelike not to warrant a second look. Music, good cheer, and a sense of community flooded the streets. The crowd typified kindness. offering water, slices of oranges, and jelly babies. St John's Ambulance also lined the route, and they were as efficient as ever. Their voluntary support of those runners who were determined to cross the line despite their ailments was compassionate and timely, and without them, several people might not have achieved their goal with such dignity. 20,000 people registered to run through that city that day, and amongst the kindest folk might have been those volunteers who stayed on to clear the streets so that the city could be returned to its ship-shaped state, ready for its inhabitants the next day. The volunteers were a great example of what can be achieved with kindness, and the runners themselves embodied kindness and courage. I believe that people are good, and that was borne out on that day. Many participants were wearing T-shirts emblazoned with the name of the charity for whom they were running. The range of good causes was as diverse and as endless as the field, and great amounts of money were raised to support the eradication of all manner of life-altering and life-limiting conditions. Some people ran in outfits heavier than themselves, and a small group completed the whole marathon, pushing a metal-framed hospital bed to raise money for a local unit. To entertain the crowd, the previously mentioned Rhino had the strength and verve to throw some shapes at the mobile disco at the 13-mile mark, when many runners were already regretting their decision to run at all. Some runners, for one reason or another, did not have the race of their dreams, and imagine the courage that must have taken to keep running when the roads were being opened and the pavements were being swept. The legacy of that marathon is significant, and I like to think that the children who lined the streets will cherish a memory that will impact upon the way they choose to live their lives, with kindness and courage. Ordinary people who were obviously extraordinary people, actively fashioning the change they want to see in the world, mile by mile, cheer by cheer, jelly baby by jelly baby. For me, kindness and courage are wrapped up in a conversation that played out with my dad several times. More than once, late into the night before an exam, when I believed that the remaining hours of dedication were not going to be enough to pull me through, I would ring home. I would share, with varying degrees of clarity and composure, that I was never going to be ready for the next day's challenge, just a few short hours away. My dad would always listen, patiently, calmly, assure me that I had done enough. The best thing that I could do would be to get a good night's sleep, as nothing would be better than having a sharp mind the next day. He would tell me that he loved me and that he was proud of me. His kind words would soothe, and I would go to bed with renewed courage, and hope would triumph. Now, my dad could reasonably have been expected to remind me that we'd been through a similar thing many, many times before, and that avoiding it was best served by studious, diligent study for 360 days of the year, as opposed to 360 minutes. But he never did. Repeatedly, his kindness gave me courage, and his reassuring assertion that I had done enough was just what I needed. However, therein lies the rub. I want to end not just by reiterating my belief that kindness and courage are life-changing, but also by pondering upon whether being reassured by ourselves or someone else that we are doing enough to be an agent of positive change is enough. Tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, any one of us could have an opportunity to undertake a random act of kindness or be courageous in such a way that we just might change someone's world, our world, forever. Thank you.